Dinner was supposed to be just another ordinary meal. The dim glow of the candles cast soft shadows on the walls. The scent of rosemary and garlic from the lamb filled the dining room, and the wine, deep and rich red, swirled in my glass. As I took a slow sip, it was a picture of domestic comfort, the kind of scene people post online to make their lives seem perfect. But beneath it all, something was wrong. I could feel it. Sheila sat across from me, her fingers fidgeting with the stem of her wine glass, her eyes distant. She had been like this for weeks. Withdrawn, secretive, always glued to her phone but careful to angle the screen away whenever I walked by. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Maybe work had been weighing on her. Maybe she needed space. But deep down, I knew better. The subtle changes, the late nights at the gym, the sudden need to wear makeup just to grab groceries. Each tiny crack in the facade added up until I saw the truth for what it was. She was cheating on me. I had suspected for a while, but I kept quiet. I needed to be sure. So I did what any man in my position would do. I watched, I listened, and I waited. And tonight, my patience was about to pay off. The fork in her hand clinked softly against the plate as she exhaled, setting it down. Then she looked at me, her expression unreadable. Her lips parted slightly, but she hesitated before speaking, as if giving herself one last moment to reconsider. Finally, she said it. "I'm leaving you." She spoke carefully, like a doctor breaking bad news to a patient. Her voice was steady, but her fingers trembled ever so slightly. Her body language screamed discomfort, but her eyes held something else. Relief. She expected me to fall apart, to demand answers, to beg. I didn't. Instead, I smiled. It wasn't the reaction she was expecting. Her brow furrowed slightly, her lips twitching as if she wanted to say more but couldn't quite figure out how to follow up after my complete lack of shock. I leaned back in my chair, setting my glass down deliberately, and tilted my head. "Oh," that was all I said. One word, and yet it unsettled her. She blinked rapidly, as if thrown off by my reaction. She had prepared for an argument, for a scene. She was ready to be the victim, to accuse me of never being emotionally available, to list all the reasons why she had no choice but to seek happiness elsewhere. But she wasn't ready for this. Sheila opened her mouth, probably to fill the silence with whatever scripted excuse she had rehearsed, but she never got the chance. Because right on cue, the front door creaked open. The blood drained from her face. Her head snapped toward the entrance, her expression frozen in horror. She had expected a dramatic scene, but not this. She looked at me, her pupils blown wide with confusion, and then, slowly, she turned toward the doorway where the figure stood. It was him, and in that moment, I knew that Sheila had just realized one crucial fact. This was no ordinary dinner. This was a reckoning. The sound of the front door creaking open was barely audible, but to Sheila, it might as well have been a thunderclap. She froze, her fork slipping from her fingers and clattering onto the plate. For the first time that evening, I saw real emotion in her eyes. Not frustration, not annoyance, but something raw and unfiltered. Panic. She turned to me as if waiting for an explanation, as if I was supposed to tell her that what was happening wasn't real. But this wasn't some bad dream. This wasn't a moment she could undo with a few sweet words or empty reassurances. No, this was reality slapping her straight in the face, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. The air in the room shifted as the footsteps grew closer. A shadow stretched across the hardwood floor, inching into the dining room until, finally, he stepped inside. And there he was, Nathan. The same Nathan she had been sneaking around with. The same Nathan she thought she had hidden so well. His presence hit Sheila like a wrecking ball, and for a split second, I saw something fascinating happen. Her expression flickered between emotions so quickly it was almost comical. First, the shock of seeing him in our home, standing there like a deer caught in headlights. Then confusion. Then something else, something that looked a lot like guilt. It was strange. Watching the person I had once trusted more than anyone struggle to process what was happening. Did she think she could control the situation? That she could twist it into something it wasn't? Or was she simply terrified that the facade she had so carefully built was about to come crashing down? Nathan, to his credit, looked just as stunned. His mouth opened slightly as if he was about to speak, but nothing came out. He looked from me to Sheila and back again, his brow furrowing in confusion. He wasn't supposed to be here tonight, at least not in this context. "Hey, babe," I said casually, my voice dripping with amusement as I leaned back in my chair. "Look who decided to drop by." Sheila flinched at the word babe. It was the same word she probably used for him. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was scrambling, desperate, searching for a way to flip this situation in her favor. But there was no way out. She started, but the words died in her throat. Nathan finally found his voice. "What's going on?" He directed the question at her, not me. That was telling. Sheila turned to him, her mouth slightly agape, but I cut in before she could spin another lie. "Oh, don't act like you don't know," I said, picking up my glass of wine and swirling it absent-mindedly. "You two have been putting on quite the show behind my back. I just thought it was time for a little reunion." Sheila's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I laughed. Actually laughed. It wasn't forced, wasn't bitter. It was genuine. "Come on, Sheila. You don't get to play dumb. You're better than that. Or at least I thought you were." Nathan shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair. He wasn't as composed as Sheila. If anything, he looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. Sheila turned to him, eyes pleading. "Nathan, don't listen to him. He's just what?" I cut her off smoothly. "Making things up? Being paranoid." I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "Sheila, I know. I've known for a while. You weren't as careful as you thought you were." Her breath hitched. Nathan took a step back. I could see the doubt creeping in now. Maybe he thought he was special, that he was the one she truly loved. But now he was realizing that maybe, just maybe, he had been played just as much as I had. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The tension in the room became suffocating as I tapped the screen and set it on the table. Then I pressed play. The audio started softly, the voices muffled at first. But then, clear as day, Sheila's voice rang out, breathy and playful. "I just wish I could leave him now. I hate pretending." I turned up the volume just a little longer. Nathan's voice responded, "You know how these things go. He's not dumb." Sheila's breath caught in her throat. Nathan, on the other hand, turned a shade paler. I let the recording play for a few more seconds, just enough for the weight of their betrayal to sink in, before I stopped it. Then, with a smile, I looked at Sheila. "You were saying?" For the first time that night, she was completely, utterly speechless. Silence, heavy, suffocating silence filled the room, swallowing every breath, every unspoken word. Sheila sat frozen, her hands gripping the edge of the table, as if it were the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Nathan, on the other hand, was shifting uncomfortably, his jaw tight, his eyes darting between me and the phone like a cornered animal. The recording had done its job. There was no room for denial now, no gaslighting, no desperate attempts to paint me as paranoid or insecure. I had given them enough rope, and they had tied the noose themselves. I took my time, let them sweat, let them stew in their own guilt and shame. Well, maybe just guilt, because Sheila looked more caught than remorseful. She opened her mouth, lips trembling, as if she was going to launch into some elaborate excuse, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said smoothly, cutting her off before she could even start. "Whatever story you're about to spin, save it. We both know it's a lie." Her nostrils flared, a flicker of irritation flashing through her eyes, but she swallowed it down. She needed to play nice now. She needed to find a way to wriggle out of this. I could see it in the way she adjusted her posture, tilting her head slightly like she was trying to soften the situation. "I was going to tell you," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, really? You didn't know how?" I gestured toward the phone. "Because it sounded like you had it all planned out. I just wish I could leave him now. I hate pretending." I repeated her own words back to her. letting them hang in the air like a guillotine waiting to drop. Seems like you knew exactly how. Sheila's mouth clamped shut. Nathan ran a hand through his hair again, looking increasingly like he regretted every life choice that had led him to this moment. Sheila, he muttered, voice strained. You told me. She whipped around so fast I thought she might give herself whiplash. Not now, she hissed under her breath, barely loud enough for me to hear. And there it was. That was the crack I was waiting for. Nathan wasn't in control here. He wasn't the man she was leaving me for because she was madly in love with him. No, he was just another pawn in whatever twisted game she had been playing. The realization must have hit him at the same time because he suddenly took a step back, a flicker of betrayal in his eyes. What the hell, Sheila? He scoffed. You said this was mutual, that you were done with him. She is, I said casually, reaching for my wine glass. She just forgot to mention that she wanted to be done on her terms. I swirled the liquid before taking a slow sip, savoring the taste. She wanted to leave with a safety net, a backup plan. But see, the thing about planning behind someone's back is, I placed the glass down with a deliberate clink. Sometimes they find out first. Sheila's entire body stiffened. Nathan let out a bitter chuckle, rubbing his face with both hands. Wow, he muttered, shaking his head. You really had me, huh? That's when I saw the shift, the moment it all clicked for him. He wasn't just realizing that Sheila had played me. He was realizing that she had played him too. It was beautiful. You, he exhaled sharply. You knew he knew, didn't you? Sheila swallowed. Nathan, you knew, he repeated, his voice rising. You just didn't think it would blow up in your face this fast. She reached for him, but he took a step back, his face twisted in something between anger and disappointment. I leaned back in my chair, fully enjoying the absolute collapse of their little fantasy. You two are quite the pair, I mused, shaking my head. But tell me, Nathan, how does it feel knowing that she was planning her escape, but you were never actually in control? His jaw tightened. Shut up. Hit a nerve. I smirked. I bet you thought you were the knight in shining armor, huh? The great savior rescuing her from her oh-so-miserable marriage. But let's be honest, Sheila doesn't want a new life with you. She just wants options. The way his eyes darkened told me that I was right. Sheila finally snapped. Stop it, she practically shrieked, slamming her hand down on the table. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I met her gaze, my smile never wavering. You have no idea. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her face flushed with frustration. I could see the war waging inside her. Part of her wanted to keep fighting, to find a way to spin this in her favor. But the other part, the smarter part, knew it was already over. Nathan let out a breath, running both hands through his hair again. He looked exhausted, defeated. I should go, he muttered. Sheila's eyes widened in panic. Wait, but he was already backing toward the door. You're on your own, Sheila, he said coldly before turning and walking out, slamming the door behind him. And just like that, her safety net was gone. For the first time that night, real fear flickered across her face. Not anger, not frustration. Fear. She had thought she could control the narrative, that she could dictate when and how this would all unfold. But now, everything had crumbled around her, and she was left standing in the wreckage, alone. I stood up slowly, adjusting my sleeves. You wanted to leave me? I said, tilting my head slightly. Congratulations, Sheila. Now you have no one. Her lips parted, her breathing shallow. You don't mean that. I smiled. Oh, I do. And with that, I turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving her alone in the house she had just burned to the ground. As I walked away from the dining room, I could feel the weight of Sheila's gaze burning into my back. I knew she was waiting for me to turn around, to say something, to give her an opening, any opening to take back control. But she had no control left. She had gambled everything, and now she stood alone, her carefully built world collapsing around her like a house of cards. I made my way into the living room, the air thick with the remnants of tension and deceit. The fireplace crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the walls, but there was no warmth left between us. Not anymore. I poured myself another glass of wine, moving slowly, deliberately, letting the silence between us stretch into something unbearable. Behind me, I heard her footsteps, hesitant at first, then more purposeful. She wasn't done yet. Wait. Her voice was quieter now, less commanding, almost pleading. We need to talk. I took a slow sip of my drink, savoring the way the wine coated my tongue before finally turning to face her. Talk, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Now you want to talk? Sheila flinched at my tone. Gone was the confident woman who had sat across from me at dinner, preparing to deliver her well-rehearsed speech. Gone was the manipulative charm she had so often wielded to get her way. What stood before me now was someone who had been stripped bare, exposed for the liar she was. This doesn't have to end like this, she said carefully, taking a step toward me. I chuckled, shaking my head. Oh, but it does, Sheila. You made sure of that. She opened her mouth, then shut it again, struggling to find the right words. It was fascinating to watch her try to rewrite the script in real time, but there was nothing left to salvage. I made sure of that. You don't understand, she tried again. You what? I cut her off, my patience wearing thin. You had to do it? You didn't mean to hurt me? You still love me? I took a step closer, watching as she instinctively shrank back. Spare me the performance, Sheila. I know exactly who you are now, and I'm done playing the fool. Her eyes darted around the room as if searching for a way out, a way to twist the story back in her favor, but there was nothing left to twist. Then, almost as if she had no control over it, she snapped. Oh, please, she scoffed, her voice dripping with frustration. What was I supposed to do, huh? Just sit around and wait for you to actually pay attention to me again? I blinked. That was her angle? That was her defense? She mistook my silence for an opening and kept going. You were so caught up in everything else. Work, responsibilities, whatever the hell else was more important than me. I had needs, and Nathan. He was there. She folded her arms as if that somehow justified it. It's not like I planned for this to happen. It just did. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head in disbelief. That's the best you've got? I asked, my voice eerily calm. That's the excuse you're going with? Sheila's jaw clenched, her eyes flashing with something defensive, but I didn't give her a chance to speak. You chose this, I said, my voice cold. You chose to sneak around. You chose to lie. And you damn well chose to sit across from me tonight and tell me you were leaving me, expecting me to break down like some lovesick idiot. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. But guess what, Sheila? I was never the idiot in this story. You were. Her breath hitched. I could see it now, the realization, the understanding that she had miscalculated everything. I set my glass down and reached into my pocket, pulling out a small stack of papers before tossing them onto the coffee table between us. Her eyes flickered to them, her brows knitting together in confusion. What's this? I smirked. Divorce papers. Already signed. She sucked in a sharp breath. What? I tilted my head, watching as she scrambled to process what was happening. You thought you were leaving me, Sheila? I said, amusement lacing my words. No, sweetheart. I left you the moment I found out what you were doing. This, I gestured between us. This dinner. This wasn't me holding on to hope. This was me letting you dig your own grave. She grabbed the papers, flipping through them, her breathing quickening with every passing second. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, no, no. This isn't how this was supposed to go. I shrugged. That's the problem, Sheila. You thought you were in control. Her hands were trembling now, the weight of reality crushing down on her. I had beaten her to the punch. She had walked into this evening thinking she had the upper hand, that she would dictate how this ended, but I had been 3 steps ahead the whole time. You don't have to do this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I gave her one last look, one final chance to see the truth. Oh, but I do. And with that, I turned, grabbed my coat, and walked toward the front door. I didn't stop when she called my name. I didn't turn around when I heard her voice crack. Because this was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment she realized that, for the first time, she had lost. The night air was crisp as I stepped outside, but I barely felt it. The weight of everything, the months of betrayal, the lies, the careful planning, had finally lifted, leaving me lighter than I had felt in years. For the first time in a long time, I was free. No more second-guessing. No more pretending not to notice the late-night texts, the whispered phone calls, the way she avoided my touch while lavishing her affection elsewhere. But as I reached my car, a voice cut through the silence. "Wait!" I exhaled slowly, gripping the car door handle but not turning around just yet. I knew that tone. It wasn't anger, wasn't even desperation. It was realization. She had finally caught up. I turned, finding Sheila standing just outside the house, barefoot on the porch, arms wrapped around herself like she had just woken up in the middle of a nightmare she didn't recognize. Her face, once carefully controlled, was now a mess of emotions. Shock, regret, panic, but most importantly, fear. Not fear of me, fear of what she had done to herself. "Please," she tried again, her voice barely above a whisper now, as if the weight of her own actions was finally suffocating her. Can we just talk for a second?" I leaned against my car, arms crossed, watching her. "Talk," I repeated, my tone unreadable. "Now you want to talk?" She nodded quickly, stepping closer as if the physical distance between us was suddenly unbearable to her. I messed up," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "I know I messed up." I raised an eyebrow. "Now you know." Her lips parted, but she had no answer. She had no defense left. And yet, despite everything, despite her lies, despite the betrayal, I could see the truth written all over her face. The truth she had ignored, buried deep beneath selfish desires and fleeting temptations. She had never truly thought this through, never truly considered what it would feel like to be standing here, alone, watching me walk away. Because in her mind, I was always supposed to be there. No matter how far she strayed, no matter who she shared her body or her secrets with, I was the constant, the safety net, the fool who would always be waiting in the wings, ready to forgive, ready to fight for her. But not this time. I tilted my head slightly, studying her, letting the silence stretch until I saw her start to tremble. "Tell me something, Sheila," I said, voice calm but firm. "Did you ever even think about what would happen after? Or did you just assume you could have it all?" She swallowed hard. You thought I'd just break, right?" I continued. "You thought I'd fall apart, beg you to stay, try to fix us, try to fix you." I chuckled, shaking my head. "And what if that didn't work? You'd run to Nathan, convince yourself that you had made the right choice, that you were meant to be together." Her face twisted with guilt, but I wasn't done. "And if that didn't work either?" I took a slow step forward, lowering my voice just enough to make her flinch. "Would you have come crawling back to me?" Her entire body stiffened. That was it. That was the moment she realized that even she didn't have an answer. Because that had been the plan all along, hadn't it? To keep her options open, to keep me waiting. I saw it all laid out in the way her breath hitched, the way her fingers twitched like she wanted to reach for me but knew she had lost that right. And yet, even now, with everything exposed, with nowhere left to run, she still had the audacity to hope. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "You don't get it, do you?" Sheila blinked rapidly, shaking her head. I just... "No, Sheila." My voice hardened. "There is no just anymore. You ended that the second you decided I wasn't enough for you, the second you chose someone else while expecting me to be your backup plan." Her lips trembled. "I don't want to lose you." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You already did." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. Not anymore. Not when I had already spent months mourning a relationship that had died long before tonight. Sheila took another step forward, and for the first time since this entire mess began, I saw real desperation in her eyes. I can make this right," she whispered. We can't." I cut her off. "And deep down, you know that." She let out a shaky breath, her gaze searching mine as if trying to find some version of me that would still fight for her. But that version didn't exist anymore. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't go." I studied her for a long moment, taking in the sight of the woman I had once loved, the woman I had built a life with, now reduced to nothing more than a stranger standing in the ruins of her own making. Then, slowly, deliberately, I reached for the car door handle and I got in, her face twisted with panic as she realized I was really leaving. "Wait!" She lunged forward, slamming her hands against the window. "Just wait." But I didn't. I started the engine, and as the car rumbled to life, I saw it. The exact moment it finally hit her. The moment she understood that I wasn't bluffing, that there were no more second chances, that this wasn't a game she could manipulate her way out of. This was the end. And as I pulled out of the driveway, watching her collapse onto her knees in the rearview mirror, one final thought crossed my mind. She had spent so long trying to run away from the life we had built together, chasing something she thought would be better. And now she had nothing. The road stretched ahead of me, dark and empty, the headlights cutting through the night like a blade. I wasn't sure where I was going, only that I couldn't stay there. Not in that house, not in that moment. Not with her standing there begging me to stay as if she hadn't already made her choice long before tonight. The hum of the engine was the only sound in the car, but my mind was far from silent. Every word, every betrayal, every moment of deceit played on repeat. A film reel I couldn't turn off. "I just wish I could leave him now. I hate pretending." Her voice echoed in my skull, that single sentence louder than anything else. She had hated pretending. Had she hated all of it? Every kiss, every night spent beside me, every conversation, every shared dream, every inside joke? Had she hated all of it or just me? I exhaled sharply, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. It didn't matter. None of it did. Not anymore. A sudden vibration from my phone on the passenger seat snapped me out of my thoughts. I glanced down. "Sheila." I stared at the screen as her name glowed in the darkness, illuminating the reality of it all. She was still trying, still reaching, still clinging. But I didn't answer. I let it ring until it stopped, leaving behind only the suffocating silence. Then, just as I thought she had given up, another buzz. A text. "Please just come back so we can talk." I turned my attention back to the road, jaw tightening. Talk? That was rich. She had plenty of time to talk when she was sneaking around with Nathan, when she was planning my replacement while keeping me warm in her back pocket just in case she changed her mind. But now that everything had collapsed, now that her safety net had been yanked away, now she wanted to talk. Another buzz. "We can fix this. I know we can." I let out a bitter chuckle. The delusion was almost impressive. Fix what? The marriage she burned to the ground? The trust she shattered? The life she discarded like it was something temporary? Something she could always come back to if her new adventure didn't work out? Another buzz. "I love you." I inhaled sharply, my grip tightening on the wheel. That was it. That was the one that almost made me laugh. Love? Love doesn't do what she did. Love doesn't lie to your face, doesn't whisper someone else's name in the dark, doesn't make you feel like a fool in your own home. Love doesn't make you question everything. I pressed my foot harder on the gas, the car speeding up as I left it all behind. Then the final text. "I'm sorry." I stared at the words, the screen glowing like an open wound. Sorry. The word felt so small compared to what she had done. Sorry wouldn't erase the months of deception. Sorry wouldn't take away the image of Nathan standing in our house, looking just as guilty as she did. Sorry wouldn't undo the fact that she had already decided I wasn't worth fighting for long before tonight. I tapped the screen, hovering over the message for a second. I considered responding, telling her the truth, that I didn't believe a single word she said, that she wasn't sorry, that she just regretted losing. But in the end, I didn't respond. I blocked her number instead. And for the first time in months, the silence finally felt like peace. Hours passed before I stopped driving. The sky had shifted from inky black to the soft grays of early morning by the time I pulled into an empty parking lot overlooking the ocean. I sat there, watching the waves roll in, the rhythmic crashing against the shore grounding me in a way nothing else had. I didn't know what came next. Did I go back to the house and pack my things? Did I find a lawyer first? Did I call someone, anyone, and tell them what had happened? I didn't know. All I knew was that I wasn't going back to her. Not now, not ever. The waves kept coming, relentless, steady, uncaring of the chaos that had unraveled in my life. There was something almost comforting about it, about how no matter what happened, the ocean would keep moving forward. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I would too. The sunrise cast streaks of gold and orange across the ocean, but I barely noticed. I sat in the driver's seat, fingers drumming against the steering wheel, the engine silent, the only sound the distant crash of waves against the shore. My phone lay face down on the passenger seat, Sheila's desperate messages locked away behind a block she never saw coming. I had left. I had walked away. And yet, a part of me was still unraveling. My mind replaying every moment of the last few months, forcing me to pick apart details I had ignored before. Had there been a moment, a single moment, where she had hesitated? Had she ever stopped and thought about the damage she was causing? Or had it always been about her? Had she ever loved me at all? I laughed bitterly at the thought. Love. That word was an insult coming from her. Whatever she had felt for me, if anything, had been eclipsed the second she looked at another man and decided he was worth the risk. The second she whispered into Nathan's ear that she was only pretending with me. I forced myself to breathe, inhaling the salt air, exhaling the anger, refusing to let her invade this moment. Because this moment was mine. I glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror, taking in the face staring back at me. Tired eyes, a clenched jaw, a man who had been holding it together for far too long, pretending he was fine while the woman he had trusted had already written him out of her life. The thought made my stomach turn. I needed to do something, anything. Sitting in this car, drowning in my thoughts, wasn't going to change the fact that my entire world had been flipped upside down. I grabbed my phone, hesitated for a second, then scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I hadn't called in months. Mike. He picked up on the second ring. Hey man. His voice was groggy, probably still half asleep. What's up? I exhaled slowly. I need a place to crash. There was a pause. Then, you good? No. I admitted, my voice hollow. Not even close. Another pause. Then, where are you? I glanced at the ocean one last time before shifting the car into drive. On my way. Mike lived about an hour away, in a quiet part of town that felt like an entirely different world compared to the chaos I had just left behind. When I pulled into his driveway, he was already outside, waiting on the porch with a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked me up and down as I stepped out of the car, taking in the exhaustion, the tension in my shoulders, the way I barely met his gaze. Sheila? He asked, not needing to say anything else. I nodded. He let out a low whistle. Damn. I followed him inside, the familiar scent of coffee and old leather filling the space. Mike's house had always been a place of quiet escape, a stark contrast to the storm I had just walked away from. We sat down in his living room, and for a while, neither of us spoke. He didn't push, didn't ask for details I wasn't ready to share. Instead, he handed me a beer, despite it being early morning, and let me sit with my thoughts. When I finally broke the silence, my voice was steady but cold. She was cheating. Mike didn't look surprised. Yeah, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. Figured. I frowned. You figured, he sighed, shifting in his seat. Look, man, I didn't know, but she was different, standoffish. The way she talked about you, it just, he exhaled, didn't feel right. A bitter chuckle escaped me. Yeah, I was the last to notice. Mike shook his head. No, you knew. You just didn't want to believe it. That hit harder than I expected because he was right. All those nights I had told myself I was imagining things, all those moments where I had convinced myself that her distance was just stress, that the way she flinched when I touched her was because she was tired, not because she had already given that part of herself to someone else. I had known. I had always known. Mike must have seen something in my expression because he leaned forward, his tone softer now. What now? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Divorce. The word felt heavy, final but not bitter. Just inevitable. Mike nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. Good. That was all he said. Not, I'm sorry. Not, are you sure? Just good. Because he knew there was no saving something that had already rotted from the inside out. We sat there for a while, the weight of it all settling between us. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel alone. And maybe that was the first step toward moving forward. A week passed before I set foot in that house again. It wasn't hesitation that kept me away. It wasn't fear either. It was the understanding that nothing in that house held any meaning for me anymore. The walls, the furniture, the photos, all of it had become a monument to a life that no longer existed. But I had to go back. Not for closure, I didn't need that. I had found it the moment I walked away. I went back because I was ready to move on. I arrived early in the morning. The air was still cool, the sky a soft shade of blue. As I stepped inside, the scent of the house hit me first, a mix of old memories and something stale, something that had lingered in my absence. I walked through the room slowly, taking in the silence, the emptiness, the faint traces of a life I had already left behind. Sheila was gone. I wasn't sure where she had gone after that night. I hadn't asked, and I didn't care. The only thing that mattered now was clearing out the last of my things, making sure there was nothing tying me to this place anymore. I moved through the house methodically, boxing up what little I still wanted. Old books, a few personal belongings, nothing more. The rest she could have it. Let her live among the remnants of the life she destroyed. As I reached the bedroom, I caught sight of a familiar envelope resting on the dresser. My name was scrolled across the front in her handwriting. A letter. For a moment, I considered throwing it away without reading it, but something made me pause. With a sigh, I tore it open and unfolded the paper. I don't know what to say that would matter at this point, but I'm saying it anyway. I messed up. I ruined everything, and I know I can't fix it. I've spent the last few days trying to figure out how I became this person, how I let everything fall apart, and the truth is, I don't know. I don't have an excuse, and I won't insult you by trying to give you one. But I want you to know, despite everything, I did love you. I still do, and I will always regret losing you. I let out a slow breath, folding the letter back up and tossing it onto the bed. She was right about one thing. She did lose me, and I wasn't coming back. A few hours later, I closed the trunk of my car, my things packed, the house behind me nothing more than a structure made of wood and regret. I didn't look back as I drove away. I didn't need to. The road stretched ahead, open and endless, and for the first time in a long time, I felt good. The weight of betrayal, of anger, of heartbreak, it was gone. Sheila was my past, a lesson learned, a chapter closed, and my future, it was mine again. I rolled down the window, letting the breeze wash over me as I drove, a quiet smile tugging at the corner of my lips. I didn't know where I was going yet, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out.